So I was a regional lead for a specific part of the Twitter product covering Japan, India, and Australia. I've been in and out of startups for a while. So I started at Rakuten. If you look at Rakuten, DNA, Cyber Agent, that's kind of part of that. You could call it maybe a first wave of Japanese startups that had really outsized success. Then you flash forward to after the global financial crisis, and you're getting into like your kind of 2010 to 2014 period. That's when you have what we call second wave, and you're seeing things like Mercari, you're seeing things like Smart News, and you're seeing things like Roxy. And what I'm starting to feel now is that maybe we're in like a third wave.
So David-san, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
So you were a former Twitter employee, and you are now working for JOSYS as Chief of Staff. Could you share us your experience, how you came to Japan?
Sure. So for starters, I came on like a scholarship. It was an opportunity to study Japanese. And then in terms of why I stayed in Japan, Japan's actually been a great opportunity for me to kind of build a career. So for most of my roles, I have one foot in Japan, one foot out. And the result is that I end up kind of doing cross-border communication, operations, sometimes a little bit of business development. And in the case of Twitter, it was related to product. And so I was a regional lead for a specific part of the Twitter product covering Japan, India, and Australia.
And what did you join JOSYS?
So for JOSYS represents like an opportunity to work in a global company while based in Japan. And so for me, I really love this one foot in, one foot out sort of opportunity. And for JOSYS, it was the sort of opportunity where I had already been aware of Yasu, our CEO and founder. As you know, he made Roxel, which was a very successful company in one of the earlier waves of Japanese kind of startup ecosystem. And this is like his second act. And so for his second act, he wanted to make a global company from the start. JOSYS, our co-founder CTO is Sanjay, based in India. And Yasu chose a problem area that is universal, which is managing a company trying to manage SaaS and device. So basically, JOSYS is offering you 360-degree visibility over your IT operations through SaaS and device management. This is something that's not unique to Japan. And so that means the company has potential to kind of expand very nicely internationally. We already have an international team in Southeast Asia as well as America. And so I'm really happy I can kind of be a part of trying to grow that international business.
We had Yasu Kane on our show, and he's like a new kind of role model in Japanese entrepreneur because he's trying to build a global company, which is very rare in Japan still. So do you think Japan's like in a transition of the business is becoming more global, more international?
I do. So I've been in and out of startups for a while. So I started at Rakuten, which I would say is kind of part of like the early first wave. If you look at Rakuten, DNA, Cyber Agent, that's kind of part of that. You could call it maybe a first wave of Japanese startups that had really outsized success, both domestically and internationally. But that's in the late 90s, a lot of these companies started. Then you flash forward to after the global financial crisis, and you're getting into like your kind of 2010 to 2014 period. That's when you have what we call a second wave. And you're seeing things like Mercari, you're seeing things like Smart News, and you're seeing things like Roxy. These are companies that acquired really great market share. They're kind of creating digital alternatives for things, whether it's Mercari with kind of flea market e-commerce, Smart News with a news aggregator, or Roxel in terms of like a printing online platform. One of the common features of not all these companies, but many of these companies, is that they were growing mostly domestically. And what I'm starting to feel now is that maybe we're in like a third wave.
Interesting.
And so you see a company like JOSYS, you see a company like NPAD, which is doing it for construction SaaS. You see a company like your own, Pivot. We're doing an English language interview. This is a Japanese started company. And now you're going more internationally. And these companies all started kind of within the last few years. You can even see it if you go from America, where there's an interesting company called Oishi Berry. Japanese founder, building an international company based out of the States that's focused on vertical farming for strawberries. That is something which, say, 10 years ago, this kind of collection of companies we might not have seen. And so I think that we are at kind of like the the vanguard, the front line of a new wave, of the way that we think about opportunities in entrepreneurship. It's not just a domestic issue, it's now an opportunity for people like JOSYS to say, I want to build a global company, and they're able to do it.
Right. Why is this change happening? Is it a generation thing, or what's your opinion?
So my opinion, if you disagree, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But my opinion is that it's about the success of the local ecosystem. So for startup ecosystems, it comes down to, are the companies able to grow, create returns? When they can create returns, that means that you have successful people who were in those maybe early members. Maybe now they have a lot of experience. Maybe now they want to start their own companies. You also have it on the venture capital side, where VCs have been able to return their funds, probably create a really nice profit along the way, and then are able to raise larger funds from limited partners. Larger funds means that you can have a greater investing opportunity. So in order to build a company that's very competitive domestically, maybe you need X amount of money. In order to build a company that's competitive internationally, maybe you need X plus Y. And ultimately, the success of the ecosystem, I think, has resulted in larger fund size, which allows us to make stronger bets. It also creates more knowledge in the ecosystem of how to build a company, what's the playbook, what should you do, what should you avoid. And so you can also have entrepreneurs who are even more prepared to take on global challenges.
So one of my American friends said, so he didn't imagine there's like even a startup in Japan, and he thinking that Japan has not invented like anything like after Walkman or something. And we only have like Pokemon, which is great, but people think of Japan as like anime, manga. Do you think that the Western media is like missing something with this kind of startup boom?
I think Japanese business is an interesting area to kind of dive into a bit more deeply. So the kind of societal pressures forcing Japan to innovate are the things that we all know about, the shrinking population, the kind of just like that demographic challenge alone is enough to kind of really spur a lot of innovation. And certainly we see things like the digital office being established by the cabinet government. We see this increase in entrepreneurship. I think just it is a case that the times are different, and Japan does stand kind of first in line in a lot of these regards to try and figure out how to make innovation work for the next kind of stages of its society. So I think Japan is, of course, interesting for the soft culture reasons, the soft power reasons that you mentioned. But from a pure kind of like, how does the country operate? How does the business, how can businesses be developed? What are the businesses being developed? I think there's a lot of stories out there. So hopefully we can hear more about them.
Yeah. So you worked at Twitter, and it's a US global company. So do you see any difference between like global business and business in Japan?
I'm going to ask you for a clarifying question.
Okay.
When you ask that question, what's like something that's kind of in your mind as something that might be different?
So maybe there are a lot of like hidden rules in Japanese culture, very domestic, homogeneous, not international, those kind of things.
Right. Okay. Understand a lot better. Thank you. So one of the things, so for me, one foot in, one foot out. I've worked across 15 countries, and one of the things I've learned is that a lot of the systems are the same, even though they might present differently. So there's no country where it's okay to kind of upstage your boss. I haven't found that country yet. There is, I think it's just about how things end up being presented. So a common refrain is that maybe Japanese people are very quiet. And so you'll have someone come in and say, like, what's your opinion? And maybe the audience is a little bit quiet, potentially.
Look at each other and
Right. And there's this expression of like, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. But I think that exists in other countries as well. I think what ends up being the common point is, how do you build the trust with your audience? And so whether, because I definitely have seen all hands in Japanese companies that are high engagement.
Yes.
And I've seen all hands in global environments that are relatively quiet.
Okay.
So I do think that there are, certainly if it's a purely domestic environment, there's plenty of kind of local considerations, but a lot of it comes down to, how are you connecting with your coworkers, and how are they going to be able to connect with you? and just kind of having your antenna up for those differences in communication, I think is kind of the key to bridging, whether it's global or domestic.
So I always read like Western media, like, and I rarely see like Japanese startups being covered.
Yeah.
And do you think it's the language problem or the market size, or what do you think about that?
I think there's a business opportunity for a PR firm.
Okay, you're right.
So I think there's certainly a language barrier, and I think for even in English language media, there's only a handful of outlets that are actually covering startups.
True.
And so I think sometimes it might just become like kind of a numbers game.
Yeah.
My recommendation is that I think that if you're a Japanese founder and you think you have a strong product, you should take a little bit of time, very modest amount of money, and have an English explanation of your product. Even if you're not targeting the international market just yet, because media coverage still helps. You might end up finding an investor or a business partner that you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And some of the work that's being done is probably really, really fascinating. So that, I think it's just kind of like a two-way street. I think you do sometimes have like a bit of an English barrier, but it's certainly overcomable.
Yeah.
And particularly now with ChatGPT-4, that business model I just mentioned might not even be applicable anymore.
Okay.
You might not need the PR firm to do it. Yeah.
So do you recommend, do you think people in the United States or the English-speaking world should pay more attention to Japan?
They should, yeah. So I think when you look at, there's some people say that Japan should be on the roadmap of any international SaaS business. They should try to allocate 10%, or they should expect they can get 10% of their revenue from Japan. It's a very stable market. It's a loyal market. It's about committing to the team here, committing to the customers here, going through that localization process, which again is required everywhere really. And when you're able to do that, you can have really, really consistent returns. So just my observation, but I do feel that there is a very strong loyalty in Japanese customers that comes from the really strong customer service expectations. And so when you're able to have a good product, great customer service, and of course at a reasonable price, you're probably going to have repeat customers for a while. In the period of time that I was kind of working on business development, we had really, really high customer retention, higher than you would sometimes see in other markets. And that's something that I think companies should want to try and take advantage of.
Yeah. So Japan being the big place for business opportunities, do you think this was always the case, or it's right now, it's the right timing?
I think the timing just kind of gets better and better and better.
Better and better.
So, one of the things that's, I think, great about Japan is openness, is curiosity. Particularly with things like ChatGPT-4, it kind of totally levels the playing field. So it's much easier to learn about the outside world, but at least in my experience in working kind of more on like the tech side, working more on the startup side, there's so many curious people who want to understand what are the latest tech trends, what is the kind of latest software, can I give this a try, can I give that a try? That is so valuable, and I think it speaks to an openness to kind of trying new businesses, trying new services. So it's just about coming over, talking to customers, and doing that sort of market exploration. But I think it's definitely a market that people should be exploring.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the part of Japan that not many people know outside Japan, that we're very curious, very engaging country. Like Twitter, it's outside of the United States, like we have the most active users.
People are very passionate about their topics. They kind of want to do those deep dives. They want to be in that community. The power of community is extremely strong. And you just kind of apply that to business. And there's going to be whatever software or whatever kind of product you're looking to sell, there's probably an already existing community that would love to learn about it.
How about your life in Japan? Are you happy living in Japan?
To my wife, I'm very happy.
Okay.
There's no problems.
Okay. That's your official statement, but what's the reality here?
The reality is also I'm very
happy.
So it's one of those things where you don't necessarily expect to be living in another country for an extended period of time. But yeah, all these years later, still here, still very happy. Love my wife, love my dog. And ultimately, I think it's about where can you kind of find the opportunity to keep growing. And so what I love about kind of working here as a person with in kind of more international business sense is that I'm still working constantly with America. I think in every job I've had, I'm working with America.
Okay. And living in Japan, yeah.
But living in Japan.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's very, very fulfilling to be able to kind of also be here, be integrated in my community, kind of have good relationships with my neighbors and all those sorts of things, and also have this kind of ability to see a little bit more outside.
Some people argue that in Japan, we're like a homogeneous country, very close in a way, and there's a term called gaikokujin, which means foreigners or maybe outsiders.
Yeah.
Do you feel that, or do you think Japan's kind of changing and more open to international communities?
I think everything is kind of changing over time. So one example I can think of is that, Japan's a very interesting place to visit. So friends have been visiting me for the entire time I'm here.
Yeah.
And I remember in the early days feeling like, wow, I need to be with this person constantly in order to make sure they don't get lost.
Yeah.
And now there's so much more English signage. There's so much, I think, more understanding of like the ways to help people get around.
Yes.
That you can just kind of give someone, check out this station, and there's probably some stuff here that you like, and they can take it from there.
Okay, just leave it. Okay.
Yeah, they can figure it out on Google. They can figure it out on, the local apps that now have English language interfaces. So in that sense, I do think that it's much more, getting easier to integrate. And then, I feel like when you move, even in the same country from town to town, so like within Japan, I'm sure it's a challenge for someone who's lived in Tokyo for their entire life to suddenly live in another part of the country. And how do you get used to it? It's just kind of over time you get used to the nuances, you learn to embrace it. I haven't embraced things like natto, which is specific Japanese dish. That
explain natto to the audience.
Natto is, I think, the literal translation is fermented soybeans.
Yes.
So I apologize. I haven't gotten.
It's good, by the way. Yeah.
I know everyone says.
Okay.
Give me another 10 years. Okay. I'll be there. I'll be on the natto train.
Okay.
So some things, you don't always get entirely used to, but overall, I think it kind of goes back to that first experience you have with, say, like your host parents. So you're here for a summer, you're here for a year, you barely speak the language, and these kind people have said you can have a bed here, we'll help kind of take you around a little bit. I think that is like the helps form the foundation for a lot of people's experience, and ultimately that sort of kindness and openness is going to be found everywhere. Not every single person, unfortunately, but overall, that sort of kindness and openness, I think, is something you can find.
So do you feel that Japan's getting better and better like every year? Do you feel that way?
For me, so far, so good. And I think that, one of the, and to kind of tie it back to the startup world, I think one of the signs of, is a country innovating? And that's something which probably overall you want to feel like you're in a place that is innovating, that is kind of evolving.
Yes, and changing.
And it might not always happen immediately, but if you look over the course of 20 years or 10 years or even 30 years, you can kind of see, wow, things have really changed. We were at a point B, and when we were at point A, we didn't know if we were ever going to get to this. So I feel like things are kind of continuing to evolve in a good way.
So speaking about change, we tend to think about like the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. So it's like disrupting, like quickly changing. Do you see any difference between change in the Bay Area and Japan? Is it more slow? Is there a difference?
So that one, I do think the rate of new business creation is certainly going to be higher in the Bay Area. The funding values are higher. I think you also have probably a higher tolerance for failure. Fail fast, move on to the next one. And being a second-time founder and maybe your first venture didn't totally work out isn't necessarily the end of the game.
I know.
And people are kind of, it's such a tightly knit, high density of kind of like-minded people. So I do think that that's something very, very special. That's what's happening out in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. The interesting period for me is when you look at that, again, post-global financial crisis, because it wasn't just Japan. In multiple kind of startup ecosystems, that 2010 to 2014 and even 2016 period, you saw a lot of different startup ecosystems starting to kind of bubble up.
Right.
And a lot of them would have to ask themselves, are we trying to be like the Silicon Valley of X, of this country or that country? And then what many started to feel is like, we need to just try to be our own thing. Because Silicon Valley is so special, so unique.
Right.
Of course, it's a fantastic role model, but we need to also kind of build something beneath our own feet.
We can't just copy Silicon Valley. Yeah.
Right. So I feel like that's one of the interesting parts about Japan. I feel like it might be different, of course, than Silicon Valley, but I do believe that it's kind of been able to kind of build its own identity. And this kind of phase one, first wave, second wave, third wave of startups is kind of evidence of that.
I agree. So what do you think is the Japanese identity of startup culture?
I think what's interesting is that you have the same kind of real dedication to kind of customer success that you would expect at a company much, much larger. So there isn't really a sense of, oh, well, this isn't that great, but I'm sure you'll deal with it. No, it's like, we're going to cover any gaps that you might feel. We're going to be there 100%. Really, really doing right by the customer, no matter how large or small you are. I think that's very, very key. I also would think that community part is key, kind of building up. You see a lot of founders kind of building up some, people are interested in their company through social media. You also see kind of offline events where people are kind of business associations or whatever that are kind of supporting like-minded individuals. And then, there's one of the things that's, I guess, common to other areas of the world is just determination. So, the people who are kind of going for a startup are extremely, extremely determined.
Yes.
They are definitely appreciative of the funding that they receive. They're treating it with a lot of respect. And they're giving it their all. So, I wish I had harder numbers on this, but just my sense is that there's probably a good number of, maybe a larger percentage of mid-career entrepreneurs as opposed to right out of college.
Yes, I feel that too. Yes.
And you see some of that, I guess, those experiences come through as they're leading the company. So that's maybe another feature.
So every company in the world says, "Oh, we value customer, customer first." But do you think, especially Japanese companies, are quite like a different level of like respecting customers? Do you feel that?
I think it's very, very thorough. So the amount of customer service reps is potentially higher. The size of the question that you'll have a human respond to is maybe higher. That is my impression.
Yeah, like even like a ramen shop, they treat you with like the utmost respect and
No, you get white glove service wherever you go.
Yes.
And it's a good point. I was just thinking about startups, but certainly in every kind of aspect, people will, as you enter a store, they'll call out, thank you for coming to the store, and when you leave, hope you come again, even if you didn't buy anything. In many other countries, if people started yelling at you after you entered, you'd think, wow, you guys need to calm down.
Do you feel that in JOSYS, because you guys are expanding to the international world, so do you think, Japanese customers need super high level respect in terms of operating business?
So I think one of the exciting things is that because we're starting out internationally, and we're starting out, of course, with a different size team. We're, I think it's already in our DNA that we're going to treat every customer as well as we possibly can, because they're the ones who are kind of helping teach us about what it means for this product in their market. What are their needs? How can we kind of learn from them? So every company is kind of built in partnership with their customers, and for us, we take the voice of the customer very, very seriously, and we're seeing a lot of positive impact from the trust they're showing us.
So you said you're living in Japan for how many years? So
Coming up on 15.
15. So what's the most significant change or like an event you noticed so far in these 15 years of showing that Japan's changing?
There's an event that happened last week called Sushi Tech Tokyo.
Yeah.
And then there's another one happening in July called IVS out in Kyoto. And these are both kind of large-scale conferences expecting, say, 10,000 or more people. Now, for some markets, maybe that doesn't seem so large, but traditionally, most startup sort of events are going to kind of peak at maybe 1,500 to 2,000 people, and that's been the case for a very, very long time.
Yes.
And so one of the key parts about building an ecosystem is building the number of people who can engage in the ecosystem to begin with. Everyone knows that there's going to be, most startups may not become unicorns, but it's about how many people are even trying in the first place. And one of the easiest entry points are media and conferences, because you can just get the information. You can start to kind of feel a little bit more confident about what it means to build a company. Maybe I can do this, or maybe I can meet someone who's doing it, or maybe I can join their team. And so in the past just 2 years, that for prior 10 years, prior 15 years, you weren't seeing anywhere near a 10,000 person startup conference.
Right.
And now just in the past 2 years, we now have 2.
That's true.
That's very, very interesting, and I think shows a lot of potential for, in sales terms, the top of the funnel.
Yeah.
How many new entrepreneurs are going to be coming out? How many more people are going to say, you know what, I'm going to try and work at a startup maybe. So that's, I think, a major change. The reason why I bring it up is that when I was trying to initially find a job, there wasn't that access point at all.
That's true.
So I would go to job fairs, and everyone was like a very established player. And you search on Google or whatever, and you're not finding anything else. And I remember at that time I had some friends who were going into work in Silicon Valley, and they were finding their way into some of those kind of very now kind of brand leading companies, and it was like, so what's the database for that here? And it was like kind of hard to find. So that's, I think, a really large change. That now, if you wanted to, you can find online resources for dev roles. You can find online resources for corporate and sales roles, for very established or kind of high potential startups. It's, I think, a true career option in a way that it wasn't maybe when I first started.
So why is this change happening? Because historically speaking, in Japan, the way to get a job is you go to college, university for 4 years, and you start shukatsu, which means job hunting, and you do it at the same time. So every group of your same age wears a certain suit and go to a company, a seminar, and they join the company in every April, at the same time, and they stay there for a lifetime. So when did that change, and why do you think that kind of a job market changed?
So I think one of the reasons why it changes is that people can start to see more role models. And so, for me as well, my first company was Rakuten. So someone like Hiroshi Mikitani is a huge figure here in Japan. Who kind of built this amazing company, and I was still working there when there were people who were from the early days. And you can kind of feel like you're walking and working with people who had built this amazing enterprise. And so being able to kind of see those people more and more, I do think that that makes a difference. And I think I think there's a anecdote that many times after some sort of kind of financial crisis, there can be actually even stronger companies that come out of it, or that can spur people to innovation. So another company in Japan, currently called Visional, but back when it first started, BizReach by Sumi Minami, his story of founding that company is that it was the global financial crisis, and I realized there's a lot of talented people who are looking for work opportunities. I'm going to make a high-end recruiting service. And that was his, that's his first business, and now it's become, a conglomerate and, really, really kind of taken off. But I think it's just people taking advantage of the opportunity, and then having that success, they become role models for a new generation, and it becomes a virtuous cycle. But nothing's guaranteed. And so I think in some ways Japan, has had a really fantastic outcome in that it's having several cycles of success, which not every ecosystem it does.
And you mentioned that we're in like a kind of third phase of success. So there are new companies being like JOSYS, like international companies. Is it true that Rakuten's official language is English, even in the Tokyo headquarters?
Yeah, I joined at that time.
Wow.
So right now we're speaking English. Currently I can speak Japanese.
Okay.
But if you go back, wind the clock back, I think I had a lot of very patient coworkers. And so that was one of the appealing points. Was that, okay, this is an opportunity for me to work. At that point, Rakuten was really accelerating its international expansion. And so the storyline was very clear. I can, maybe try to join this international company. The official language is English. Let me put it in my resume. So that was like an amazing opportunity.
How did the Japanese workers respond? Was it like a shock for them? Like suddenly your company's official language will become from Japanese to English?
I imagine it was challenging, but for me, I think in almost each of my roles, I've been kind of like a first sort of person. So I was the first non-Japanese hire in like a 60-person department there. In my second role, I was part of a founding team of a startup that was expanding into Japan. And then at Twitter, I was the first kind of regional lead, trying to kind of manage many different cultures but for a same kind of purpose. And then here as well, I'm the first non-Japanese hire local to Japan. Of course, we have many fantastic colleagues internationally. So I think it's something which people are generally just very welcoming on. And to reflect back on that time at Rakuten, ultimately, everyone kind of wants to see you succeed. And so they will try to give you extra tips or, watch out here, try this there. And so overall, I felt like for my team specifically, it was welcoming.
So you've been living in Japan for 15 years. So what's the most misunderstood aspects of Japanese culture, Japanese business, something, stereotype?
So one thing that I kind of catch myself thinking sometimes is trying to help people understand that when you get here, it maybe won't feel so different. So I was talking with a colleague the other day. Most big cities kind of feel the same. And then let's say you get out of the city and you live in the suburbs. Most suburbs probably feel the same as well. So my day-to-day life, I always like to joke I left the suburbs of America and I live in the suburbs of Japan. So the rhythms of what you do, I think, are still very, very similar. And I think it's just kind of an interesting observation that ultimately things that might seem like they're so different and so other side of the world, ultimately it's maybe not. Maybe people like to go out with their friends on the weekend. Maybe people like to see a movie. Maybe people, everyone complains about the train. So, I guess over time I've found that there's just a lot more similarities.
So, David, we need to wrap up. So, I think our audience are interested in Japan, not just as a tourist, but maybe working in Japan and building their professional careers. Do you have any final comments for our audience?
I think they should check it out. So it's definitely a growing market. I think more and more companies, whether they're starting here and going outward or outward coming in, there's more and more opportunities for people who can kind of work across cultures. And as time goes on, I think the number of companies where language is not as much of a consideration will also increase. But ultimately, I think the core is that very good companies really are not, generally speaking, can work around the language because it's all about talent. So if you're world-class talent and you want to try and build part of your career here in Japan, you should take a look because there probably are some really interesting opportunities for you.
What would be the advantage of working in Japan, building your career?
I think, just personally, I think when you can kind of work outside of just one market, you just learn new ways of connecting.
That's true, yeah.
Connecting things. Yeah, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing as well. And so I think just as a opportunity in your life, if you're able to do it, working in more than one market is fantastic. So I encourage people to give it a try.
Okay, yeah, excellent. So David-san, thank you for joining our show.
No, thank you so much for having me.